Hi, and welcome again to another walk down the hallways of the StarFleet Leadership Academy. We are learning some lessons that are very pertinent to Star Trek, the television series, especially as taught by Captain or Admiral James T. Kirk, who flanks me on either side. And actually, I just said that wrong because it's not just a TV series, it's also the films. We are looking at the leadership lessons that Kirk could bestow upon those at the Starfleet Leadership Academy, the stuff that he did that people learn by. And so today, the leadership lesson that applies for leaders especially is one that I think sometimes gets lost, especially in the original series, Star Trek, because it came out in the 60s and because it is so old. Many people now look back on it with fond memories if they remembered the first run. Most have seen it in reruns or caught it in some type of streaming format, or they went to DVD, Blu-ray, then to streaming format. And because the series is so old, we tend to think of the James T. Kirk character as a kind of an action-adventure character, and yet as Star Trek as a franchise then developed through the years, you have a Jean-Luc Picard that comes along, a Cisco that comes along, and we tend to think of those captains as being much more cerebral, where Kirk was the action, fist fight, throw a punch, throw a kick guy. Picard, yeah, he didn't do it that much. Later on, it became much more an elevated, lofty leadership that these captains seem to display. And what gets lost in that is something that Captain Kirk displayed throughout not only the series, but then also in the films. The leadership lesson is this: you have to care about your people as much as you do about your mission. The point of that is to go back and look at all the times in the original series where Kirk was in an impossible situation, or the Enterprise was in an impossible situation, and he was bartering with an enemy, trying to exchange his own life for the life of his crew. How many times was he putting himself on the front line to do battle for the life of a crew? Every time there was a loss of a crewman, he took it very personally, and almost to the point of using that as the challenge and the motivator to rise up and defeat his enemy. In the later series, especially, one of the things that I saw in The Next Generation that I always didn't appreciate was that the loss of life of a crewman seemed to be handled like just data or a statistic that helped them formulate their next strategy. For Kirk, it was a battle cry that he was going to rise up and he was going to do something about that. Over and over again, there is that very compassionate, fiery leader that would lead from the gut, but at the same time, one of the characteristics about Kirk that set him apart is that he realized that everybody on board the Enterprise, everyone on board, was his responsibility, and he tried to show a caring and compassion about them. Now, that's reading a lot into a television film hero, but yet, if you think about it, when it comes to sheer footage and hours of content and hours of created content, in the character of James T. Kirk, you have a fictional leader that has just as much volume of work as many that we look at today that we can study. And so that is what you need to remember. You have to care as much about the people that you're leading as you do about the mission that you're on. Now, you don't let the people you're leading rob you of completing the mission that you're on, but a great leader figures out how to get them there together and values their worth along the way. If you're a leader, you have to remember that. If you're a follower, you want to follow a leader that values you and sees you as important. You want to follow a leader that you know will have your back. You want to follow a leader that you know is not going to take the politically correct approach or the easy approach if things get tough, but instead they're willing to roll up their sleeves and go to work and do battle if that's what it takes. That's the kind of leader that I want to follow, and that's the kind of leader that each of us can be. Jesus was that kind of leader. He didn't leave his disciples alone to face the world without them being sure that he had their back. As a matter of fact, even as he was getting ready to leave them, he was promising them in the very same breath that he would tap out of in less than 24 hours. I'm going to be sending you a comforter. I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to prepare a place for you. Again, making sure that his closest friends, the disciples that he was leading, knew that he was a leader that had their back. And even though it looked like and would feel like he was deserting them, he was not. Important lesson. Remember it and lead well. I look forward to joining you on our next trip through the walls and halls of the Starfleet Leadership Academy.